At exactly 4:47, 43 Iranian speedboats surged out of hidden coves along the northern coastline of the Strait of Hormuz. Fiberglass hulls cut across the water at speeds approaching 85 knots, engines screaming as they raced toward the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Each boat carried a three-man crew, 107mm rocket launchers, and the kind of confidence that comes from operating close to home waters. From the perspective of the Revolutionary Guard commanders coordinating the attack, the plan looked perfect on paper. The Strait of Hormuz is narrow, maneuvering room is limited. Large ships can't easily turn away, and lots of small, fast boats can create chaos. They believed saturation would defeat technology. What they didn't realize was that they were about to run directly into one of the most advanced defensive networks ever placed at sea. The Strait of Hormuz is more than just a narrow stretch of water. It's a geopolitical choke point about 21 nautical miles wide, where roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply passes every day. Shipping lanes are only about 2 miles across in each direction. Iran controls the northern shoreline, and islands scattered across the strait create dozens of potential hiding spots for small boats. For years, Iranian forces have studied that geography closely. They know where radar coverage can weaken, where currents distort sound, and where coastal features provide concealment. Local knowledge can be powerful. Sometimes it can also create overconfidence. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower was not alone in those waters. Two Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, USS Gravely and USS Thomas Hudner, held defensive positions on either side of the carrier. Above them, an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter orbited at about 2,000 feet, its radar scanning the surface of the water far beyond the horizon. And much higher above that, satellites monitored heat signatures across the entire region. The Iranian boats believed they were launching a surprise. American systems had already been watching them prepare for hours. The first radar contacts appeared at a distance of 22 nautical miles. 43 fast-moving targets emerging from Iranian territorial waters in organized waves. It was a classic swarm tactic, overwhelm defenses with numbers. On paper, that idea has appeal for smaller navies trying to challenge much larger ships. In reality, American combat systems are designed specifically to handle large numbers of threats at once. Inside the Combat Information Center aboard the destroyer Gravely, the shift from routine watch to active defense happened almost instantly. Blue displays lit the darkened room as operators focused on their screens. The Aegis combat system had already detected and classified the approaching boats. It calculated their speed, their direction, and exactly when they would enter weapons range. Within less than a minute, every ship in the carrier strike group had the same complete tactical picture. The Iranian boats were still more than 10 minutes away. Plenty of time to prepare. Aegis works somewhat like an extremely advanced traffic control system, except instead of guiding aircraft safely through the sky, it organizes defensive actions against incoming threats. The AEN/S PY-1D radar doesn't rotate like traditional radar antennas. Instead, 4 fixed panels scan the sky and sea simultaneously in every direction. The system can track dozens of contacts at once, continuously updating their positions and predicting future movement. Powerful computers evaluate the situation in real time, calculate firing solutions, and coordinate defensive weapons across multiple ships. By the time the approaching boats reached engagement range, the system had already run countless simulations and determined the best response. At 4:51, the swarm divided into 3 separate attack waves. The first group accelerated directly toward the carrier, the second angled toward the escorting destroyers. The third remained farther back, possibly preparing to launch additional weapons if the first waves caused enough confusion. It was an aggressive plan, but the strike group had already anticipated every move. The Seahawk helicopter overhead banked sharply and descended toward the leading boats. Its radar locked onto the fastest contacts while laser targeting systems prepared the helicopter's weapons. 2 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles launched from under the helicopter's wings. Each missile streaked toward its target at high speed, guided precisely by the helicopter's targeting system. Within seconds, 2 of the approaching boats disappeared in bright explosions across the water. 2 boats destroyed, 41 still approaching. The first wave continued forward. 13 boats remained in the lead group, closing quickly. Range, 6 nautical miles. Time to engagement distance, about 4 minutes. The crews in those boats believed speed and numbers would overwhelm the defenses. But modern naval defenses rely on layered systems designed to handle exactly this kind of scenario. A defensive launcher aboard the destroyer gravely rotated smoothly as it tracked the approaching boats using radar and optical sensors. The system prepared to fire short-range defensive missiles designed for fast incoming threats. Several RIM-116 rolling airframe missiles launched in rapid sequence. These missiles are built for speed and precision, capable of locking onto targets using both radar and infrared guidance. During flight, they spin rapidly, stabilizing themselves as they adjust course toward their targets. One by one, they race toward the approaching boats. The rolling airframe missiles used a guidance system that combined passive radio frequency tracking with infrared sensors. Once launched, they didn't need further input. The missiles accelerated to speeds around Mach 2.5 and raced toward their targets, leaving thin contrails across the early morning sky. Within seconds, 4 speedboats disappeared in violent explosions. The impact shattered fiberglass hulls instantly. These weren't large ships designed to absorb damage. These were lightweight craft built for speed. When struck by missile fragments, they simply came apart. 9 boats from the first wave continued forward. Range, 3 nautical miles. That distance placed them inside the engagement envelope of the destroyer's close-in weapon system, often nicknamed R2-D2 by sailors because of its dome-shaped radar housing. Despite the nickname, the system exists for a very serious purpose, the final protective layer against threats that slip past every other defense. The failing system aboard USS gravely rotated toward the incoming boats. Radar and optical sensors locked onto the targets automatically. In its final defense mode, the system can operate with minimal human input. The M61 Vulcan cannon began spinning. 6 barrels, 20mm ammunition, thousands of rounds per minute. When the weapon fires, it creates a dense stream of metal designed to intercept anything crossing its path. The cannon opened up with a deep mechanical roar. A continuous stream of rounds streaked across the water as the fire control radar adjusted aim in tiny fractions of a second. One speedboat was hit almost immediately. Its hull broke apart under the impact, and the rockets aboard detonated in a secondary explosion. The system shifted to the next target, then the next. To observers, the engagement looked almost mechanical, because it was. Sensors tracked targets, computers calculated trajectories, and the system adjusted its fire with precise timing. Within roughly a minute and a half, the first wave had been completely stopped. 15 boats had launched toward the carrier group. None reached effective weapons distance. The carrier itself continued on course without changing direction. The second wave attempted a different tactic, steering toward the escorting destroyers in hopes of splitting defensive fire. But the ships were connected through shared targeting systems. Information from radar and sensors flowed instantly between vessels. Each destroyer knew exactly what the others were tracking. Missile defenses aboard USS Thomas Hudner responded quickly, intercepting several of the approaching boats before they could close the distance. Phalanx systems on both destroyers created overlapping zones of protection across the water. By 4:58, the remaining boats in the third wave recognized the situation had turned against them. The surviving crews attempted a different move. Several launched Nor anti-ship missiles from maximum range before turning away. The Nor missile is an Iranian-produced version of a Chinese anti-ship design. It flies just above the surface of the ocean at subsonic speed, guided by radar toward large targets such as ships. 8 missiles rose from the boats and accelerated away. They skimmed low across the water, descending to only a few meters above the waves as they began their final approach. The carrier group had roughly 90 seconds before impact. That was more than enough time. Destroyers in the formation launched evolved Sea Sparrow missiles from their vertical launch systems. These interceptors are designed specifically to defeat incoming anti-ship missiles before they reach their targets. The missiles accelerated rapidly, maneuvering at extremely high speeds to intercept the incoming threats. One by one, interceptors met the approaching missiles in mid-air. Explosions flashed across the horizon as interception fragments destroyed the attacking weapons before they could close in. 7 missiles were eliminated quickly. 1 missile managed to slip through the initial intercept pattern. Range to the carrier dropped rapidly. At that point, the final defensive layer activated. The phalanx system aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower locked onto the incoming missile as it approached the carrier at high speed. The system calculated the intercept point and opened fire. A short burst of cannon fire filled the air. Moments later, the missile broke apart hundreds of meters from the carrier's hull. Fragments splashed harmlessly into the water. The closest any weapon came to the ship was still far outside damaging range. At 5:02, the engagement was effectively over. 43 speedboats had launched toward the carrier strike group. None reached attack distance. A handful of surviving boats attempted to turn back toward Iranian waters. The Seahawk helicopter overhead tracked them easily. One by one, the helicopter's missiles disabled the fleeing craft before they could escape the area. The carrier strike group never changed course. Operations aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower continued as scheduled. The encounter lasted only minutes, but it demonstrated something important about modern naval defense. Layered systems, shared information, and technology designed to respond faster than any single attacker could react. Sometimes the outcome of a battle is decided long before the first shot is fired. The cost breakdown of the encounter told a harsh story. Iran deployed 43 speedboats, each costing roughly $50,000. 8 anti-ship missiles were launched, each valued at around $1.2 million. Add in fuel, ammunition, and operational expenses, and the total cost of the operation climbed to several $million. The human cost was even heavier, with more than 100 IRGC naval personnel lost during the failed assault. And the result? No damage to American ships, no disruption to the carrier's mission, no strategic objective achieved. On the American side, the defensive response relied on layered systems. Several rolling airframe missiles were launched from the destroyers. Evolved Sea Sparrow interceptors engaged the incoming cruise missiles. The Seahawk helicopter used Hellfire missiles against fast boats that remained a threat. Close-in weapon systems fired bursts of cannon rounds to eliminate targets that slipped closer. The total cost of the defensive weapons used added up to tens of millions of dollars. But the outcome was decisive. The attacking force was completely neutralized, while the carrier strike group suffered no casualties and no damage. The larger impact, however, wasn't financial. It was strategic. The engagement demonstrated how difficult it is for small boat swarm tactics to succeed against modern naval defenses built around layered protection, shared targeting data, and rapid response systems. Every officer who survived that operation witnessed firsthand how quickly advanced defensive systems can dismantle a coordinated attack. That realization carries consequences for doctrine, training, and morale. Meanwhile, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower continued its patrol. Aircraft operations resumed later that same day, according to schedule. From the perspective of the carrier strike group, the encounter had been another operational event handled by systems and crews trained to respond quickly. Within 2 days, Iranian state media released statements describing the attack very differently. The narrative presented to domestic audiences suggested that Iranian forces had forced the American carrier to withdraw. But the navigation logs aboard the Eisenhower showed something else entirely. Throughout the entire encounter, the carrier maintained its original course and speed. No evasive turns, no emergency maneuvers. The ship sailed a steady path through the Strait of Hormuz, while its escorts handled the defense. Moments like that illustrate how modern naval warfare often unfolds. Technology, coordination, and layered defenses can shift the balance dramatically when one side attempts to challenge a much more advanced system. Iran's commanders intended to demonstrate that they could threaten a major carrier operating in confined waters. What the encounter ultimately demonstrated instead was the effectiveness of integrated defensive systems designed specifically to counter that kind of attack. Some military lessons are learned slowly through years of analysis. Others become clear within minutes. If you found this breakdown interesting, consider subscribing and sharing the video. Your support helps bring more little-known stories of modern military operations to light.